Thank you. You may be seated. Dr. Selebano, do you swear that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth? And if so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Very well. The cross-examination will continue. Good morning, Advocate.
Good morning, Justice.
Morning, Judge.
And good morning.
Morning,
Doctor.
Judge. Morning, Judge.
Morning, Dr. Selebano.
Morning, Counsel.
When we left off yesterday, we were in 28 April 2015, and we were discussing the letter from the clinicians in which they raised many concerns. And in the course of that discussion, we spoke about Section 27 of the Constitution and the importance of not taking away services, existing services, that are being provided to healthcare users. Do you recall that?
Yes, Counsel.
Apart from the constitutional obligation, I would like to, Justice, in fact, if I may, I beg leave to hand up another exhibit, and it will be Ella 113, and it's a budget speech by the Provincial MEC for Finance, Barbara Creasy.
Yes. Ella 113 is admitted to the record. Is there a copy for the witness?
Thank you.
Dr. Selebano, it's the budget speech by the MEC for Finance, and the speech is dated 7 March 2017, and it's the presentation to the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. I'd like you to have a look at page 7 of that document, please. And right at the bottom of page 7, there's a heading, cost cutting. Justice, are you there?
I am there indeed.
Cost cutting. Do you see that?
You can see that.
And I'd like to just read out what the MEC says before I ask you the question. She says, "Honourable members, over the past 2.5 years, all provincial departments have been guided by National Treasury circulars to cut costs on non-core expenses. By non-core expenses, we mean those expenses which are primarily targeted at government itself, rather than spending targeted at our citizens. Examples include catering, corporate branding, accommodation and travel expenses." And then the paragraph after the next says, "It has never been provincial government policy to save costs by cutting back on services to our citizens. In fact, honourable members, every effort has been made to protect the budgets of health, education and social development." So what MEC Creasy is making clear is that it's not the policy of government to cut back on core services, meaning services which are intended for citizens, which are targeted at citizens as she defines it. So can you answer why this program of mental health users, this project, was chosen as a cost-saving measure?
Well, I cannot, I don't disagree here with what probably MEC Barbara Creasy was saying. I was not there. But if your question is, why did we choose this? It was not at that time, and And through you just a second, at that time the thinking was different. At that time, the intention was not to cut the services. Not cutting the services. The thinking, as I told you yesterday, was if we are able to shift to where we will be able to then support directly now as government. That was the thing.
No, but you missed the question. The rump of the question is, it's government policy that there will be no cost cutting on core services to citizens. That's the policy. Do you contest that policy?
No, I don't.
MEC says further, what Council read to you, this was never government policy to cut costs in relation to core services to citizens. And then follows the question, why did you act contrary to government policy? Why did you cut costs in relation to citizens? Core services. That is the question Council is putting to you.
Justice Moseneke, can I just point out, before the witness answers this question, that if you look at the document which has just been handed up, it's for the 2017-2018 budget.
So?
It doesn't relate to the period in question.
No, you're off the mark entirely, Mr. Cook, with respect. The MEC says clearly it was always government policy not to cut costs. She emphasizes that there's never been their policy to do so, any time in the past. That it was 2017 is neither here nor there.
Justice Moseneke, I'm just pointing out that the question can be put to the witness, but not in relation particularly to this document, which relates to a budget after the event.
As I indicated earlier, you have no real standing in this hearing. You cannot object except if there is a vital interest of the witness you think is being invaded. The question is legitimate. In 2017, the MEC says it never was government policy to cut costs on core services directed at citizens. What's wrong with that? And she's been asked in 2015, why did you cut costs on core services to citizens? Proceed. Question is legitimate.
Justice, and perhaps if I could just add, for the sake of completeness, that I began the quotation from the MEC where she talks about the past 2.5 years. So this is in the context of a period of time. The fact that she was giving the speech in March 2017 relating to that budget is not of concern to us.
Yeah. Proceed with the question. Would you answer the question, please?
Yeah, okay. Council says we cut costs. Our thinking that time, we were not cutting costs. And I said it again, we were saying the same cost that would be incurred at a particular, and that is the thinking. And Judge, please understand, like I said yesterday, I'm not defending, I'm explaining the thinking. At that time, we said we are enhancing our revenue. The same services that we have been spending on life health care, we could shift them and be able to get the same value through our own services.
It sounds clever, but it takes us nowhere.
What?
You're cutting costs on people's services, but you're trying to save money by giving people services at another place so that you can save money. So Council asks you, one of your own, the MEC says it never was government policy. How do you explain that you gave a directive to cut costs on core services? That's the question. What is your answer to that?
That's why I'm saying we move from a different understanding. Our thinking then was that we are enhancing, we are not cutting. You are saying, I understand it becomes this and that, but our understanding...
Why did you move people from life as a demanding? You told us yesterday already, haven't you?
Yes, I said. There was
we can play the record back to you. in order to cut costs?
I said the fiscal pressure.
Same thing. It's a fancy word. In order to cut costs or fiscal pressure, right? So council legitimately says to you, besides the constitution and the law, it was not even policy of your government to cut costs on core services directed at citizens. What is your response to that?
I still differ with council on that, the manner in which she's putting it is that we went out there to deliberately cut costs. And our thinking, and I'm saying it again, Judge, with due respect, our thinking was not, as at hindsight, she's able to say that, at hindsight, that our thinking was that if we do things the way we are thinking we'll do them, we will still be able to offer the same services.
Well, tell council, what were you doing? Why did you shut down the contract?
It was not only cost cutting, I did say it yesterday. Also, the Auditor General had queried.
But was it cost cutting? Was it?
Revenue enhancement, we called it that. I mean,
no.
It cost cutting, no, but you were not there in those discussions.
No, I'm sorry, Dr. Selebano, because you're playing with words.
No, I'm not.
Yesterday, you said you were under fiscal pressure.
Fiscal pressure.
And you needed to cut costs.
To manage costs. Revenue enhancement, that's what we called it.
What does revenue enhancement mean?
It means you look at everything that you have and say, how can we shift? And I said to you, with the same rent, to stretch the rent to get the same value. That's what I said to you.
So you needed to make the money go further?
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Stretch the rent.
And to do that, you terminated the contract.
But also, please just say to stretch the rent to get the same value. Remember I said that. You agreed with me.
No, I never agreed. No, don't. I'm asking you the questions. You said that you were under fiscal pressure. Money was an issue. Isn't that so?
It's still an issue even now with the department.
Yes, and the MEC for Finance says that indeed there were circulars from National Treasury to guide departments as to how to cut costs.
That's right. I agree with you.
And they were not to be, the departments were not to cut costs at services targeted at citizens. Do you agree with that?
You read it, and this is what, if you're saying I agree with what MEC is saying, yes, it's here. I can see it.
The real question is, why did you go against policy?
No, we didn't go against policy. No. We didn't deliberately go against policy.
I'm not talking about deliberately. I'm saying, why did you choose to cut costs on services directed at vulnerable citizens? When the policy is you never do that.
We never did that. That's what I'm saying. We never did that.
And that's why they are still alive.
No, Judge, please.
No, but it's a serious matter, and you're playing marbles.
No.
I want to suggest to you.
No, Judge.
Confront the question. You were the person in charge. You are asked a question about policy of your government, and grapple with the issue. Show some serious intention to address the issue that's raised with you.
Judge, with a lot of respect to you and the council, you also have to appreciate the thinking at that time. It is important to appreciate the thinking at that time. When you fast track it to now, it looks like the way you are saying it, but the thinking at that time is we're doing a revenue enhancement program.
And would revenue enhancement involve spending more money?
No.
No.
It involves ensuring that you get your debts from those who are owing you. There are departments that are owing us. Get that money. It involves some of the things that MEC Chris is talking about, ensuring that we don't spend on anything, no accommodation, no traveling, nothing. It involved looking at other services where we can still do more
for the same amount of money.
By stretching the rent.
For the same amount of money. Is that what,
Well,
on
the
your
budget,
understanding?
the budget would be fixed, yes.
Yes, in fact that's true. So then I'd like to ask you this. And in order to put the question to you, I need you to have a look at another exhibit. And it's in the exhibit bundle, and it's Ella 59.
Nine. Sorry.
Do you have it?
Yes, yes, Councillor, I have it.
And it's an official Gauteng province document, and it is headed, Proposed Development of New 900 Beds Facilities for Mental Health Services to be Constructed at Tara, Westkoppies and Sterkfontein.
That's right.
And it is a document that's signed by you,
That's right, I saw that.
and it was in November 2016.
That's right.
Yes?
Yes, I can see that.
And so you've seen this document before. You recall this document?
I've signed it, definitely, then I went through it.
Does it look familiar to you?
I accept this is probably my document. It's my document. I've signed it.
So the purpose of this is set out in paragraph 3 of the document. It says the Gauteng Department of Health experiences a high prevalence of mental health conditions in the communities. The communities are exposed to greater risks of mental illness and psychological distress due to varying social factors and pressures. And the second paragraph, the inability to admit and accommodate the identified patients is not because of lack of willingness. The major factor limiting access to mental health care is the limited hospital capacity. And then towards the end of the same paragraph, the Department of Health records indicate that in instant it requires an average of 1,200 beds capacity additional to the existing to relieve other areas of distress within the mental health care system. The department is therefore commissioning the construction of 3 new facilities. At Tara Hospital, 300 beds. Westkoppies Hospital, 300 beds. And Sterkfontein Hospital, 300 beds.
That's right.
Why were you planning to build and spend money on additional beds while at the same time terminating the beds that were accessible to you at Life Esidimeni?
But if you read it again, let me also read it. It says, Gauteng Department of Health experiences a high prevalence of mental health conditions. So here the idea was that this solution is not a permanent solution. It's not a permanent solution. We need to have a long-term solution, and the long-term solution would be to have facilities that are not outsourced but insourced, done inside the department. That was a long-term solution. That's the reason.
But would this have stretched the rand?
Well, by stretching the rent, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily mean then you hardly ever spend anything.
Well, I'm trying to understand what you mean by when you spend, when you revenue enhance, when you cut costs, and when you spend.
Okay.
So you've said to us that the department was under fiscal pressure. At the same time that you used that as a reason to terminate the contract with Life Esidimeni, you enter into plans to build 900 beds. And I will come to the cost of the building of the 900 beds in a moment.
I agree, but you would also not
you agree with what? Let's just recall what you agree with.
No, she's saying that we got into an enhancement program, and I said I agree with that. But I'm saying also she cannot be cancelled, my forgiveness. I'm very, very sorry,
Yeah.
please. Through you, Judge, it's no
Okay.
disrespect, yes. Cancel, but also you can't begrudge us for planning, because we found there were no plans for in-sourced services. Here, Tara is a psychiatric hospital, Vescopis is one also, and Sterkfontein. So the plan was, finally we are going to have here, actually, if I were to explain to you the situation in hospitals, then you'll understand why we had to plan this way. We had to plan this way into the future.
This was in November 2016.
That's right.
And your planning, according to your planning, and it's set out under the heading infrastructure planning,
That's right.
the following deliverables are envisaged. And it sets out 10 deliverables.
Where is that? Where are you now, Council?
On the same page, under the heading infrastructure planning.
Just give me the reference again,
Okay.
Council, please.
Sorry, Justice, it's LA 59.
LR 59, thank you. I've got it.
Where it says infrastructure planning. That's right.
And it says the following deliverables are envisaged. And it sets out 10 deliverables. And some of them include, for example, at 3.2, accommodation list of the facilities should include mental health care wards for 900 beds, kitchen facilities, ablution facilities relative to the number of users accommodated, training facilities for educational programs, indoor rehabilitation facilities, and outdoor sporting activity grounds, outdoor seating facility under shade. 3.3, all wards should be provided or fitted with temperature regulation systems, automated or manually operated. 3.4, overnight facilities for health caregivers and supporting staff, as opposed to permanent accommodation facilities for staff. 3.5, all facilities should have sufficient security provisions. 3.6, all yards should be fenced with appropriate fencing materials to control and manage movement of patients. And so on and so on. That would be quite costly, wouldn't it?
But that is also noble.
It's also noble.
It's also noble.
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm not questioning the nobility of the motive to build more hospitals. My question is related to cost cutting or cost saving, however you wish to explain it.
Council, I don't understand when you are cutting costs. This is a service. It's a service platform. When you cut costs, you don't shut down the service. I don't understand when you say we are cutting costs, but you still want to build. We still have to provide medication. We still have to provide food for patients. We still have
Yes,
to
except
provide,
that didn't take place for the users at Life Esidimeni who were moved.
I don't know why you say that. I don't agree with that.
Well, we've got a ways to go, and I'm surprised to hear you say that you don't agree with that if you've been following these proceedings and if you've read the Ombuds report. My point is this. In an effort to save costs, you terminated the contract. It says so in the termination letter. In the process of doing that, lives were endangered. Would you agree?
In hindsight, yes, I agree. And
so I'm questioning you on the motive, not the nobility of this plan. And what I'm questioning is, why was it necessary to cut costs in relation to those patients when there were plans to spend money at great cost?
Yeah, I hear you. Except you are taking one incident and then squeeze it into another incident. The planning here, in government, when you plan to, through you, Justice, when you plan, let's say for a clinic, it's not like in private where you say, I want to have a clinic and then next week you have a clinic. It doesn't work like that. It works through a cycle. So You plan now, you submit it to DID, that is the Department of Infrastructure Development. Then you submit it again to Treasury. Then in that cycle, money is allocated to do the infrastructure planning. So it wouldn't have been, by all intents and purposes, that by 2017, the facilities would have been built. No, it wouldn't have been like that.
No. If there's fiscal pressure, that is the question. To use your words, why do you go plan this grand facility for 920 beds? And just about a few months ahead of that, you had thrown out 1,000, nearly 480 patients out of life as a domain.
Yeah.
So council wants to know, why is cost cutting the correct motive for the marathon project when a few months later you plan to build and spend hundreds of millions? That is the inquiry.
Yeah, Chief Justice.
And I just urge you to confront the issues, because we're struggling to understand what was happening in your mind when the marathon project was happening.
Yeah, but
These are not attempts to demean you or anything. We want to understand why would you choose to send people out there, patients who are vulnerable, and a few months later you have this grand plan to build this, to expand these 3 existing mental facilities.
Okay. Justice, it's painful, I must say. Like you put it, we threw them out of life as domain. In real terms, really, that's why I keep on saying the thinking at that time and hindsight again. The intention, there was no nefarious intention to throw out patients. You can't do that. It's not how health systems work. You don't throw out patients. On hindsight, but also this was in November. In the process, we planned. This was not the only plan for NGOs. There are also plans, I can tell you now, they have not been actualized, that we must refurbish hospitals.
No, but the cut of it, Doctor, please.
No, but I'm giving the bigger picture, yes. Justice, that it doesn't mean when you are in a fiscal situation, then nothing happens, people are not eating, there's no medicine, there are no x-rays. All those things are still happening. The expansion of population was actually necessitating that you need to plan further, down the line, not even in my time, to have facilities that the council read well, that are now much better. They've got fencing, they've got all, because we don't have those facilities.
You cut costs
as government.
The council is really saying to you, cut cost on around 1,500 patients at Esidimeni, and you plan a few months later to build this grand facility. Why don't you wait why don't you wait? And when the facility is there, move them to this place they deserve, for instance. So she's probing what was happening in the executive mind that led to this tragedy.
Yeah.
If you could just appreciate what we're trying to do.
I do a lot.
Please,
Justice.
In your senior position, grapple with what we're trying to grapple with. Yes. Was it money? And hence the question, but you had money to build. Was it money? What was it?
No. But let me explain again. And the council, I think, would know this. She has been, and I would want to think council has interacted a lot with government. And I know that. The cycle, government budget cycles, what you plan now, you will not get it next month. You will probably, if lucky, get it the next budget cycle.
Okay. I understand that, Dr. Selebano, but I think we're getting a bit off track. So let me bring you again to the relevance of this.
Okay.
In this document, the LA 59, the planning for building 900 beds, you say in the document, the major factor limiting access to mental health care is a limited hospital capacity.
Where is it, Councillor, if you
In
don't mind?
second paragraph, under the heading that says strategic intent.
Strategic intent, yes.
The second paragraph?
The inability.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Do you see that?
I see that. Where it says it is not lack of willingness.
Yes.
Yes.
So why is it? Let me ask you this. Was it your policy to deinstitutionalize patients?
Deinstitutionalization is it's government policy.
Was that a motivation for for terminating rather the contract with Life Esidimeni?
Deinstitutionalization. We implemented policy, that deinstitutionalizing policy. We implemented that.
Was the termination of the contract with Life Esidimeni intended to give effect to the policy of deinstitutionalization?
That process does that, yes.
But how can you be, on the one hand, saying that you are deinstitutionalizing into the communities, and on the other hand, expending these resources into facilities for institutionalizing patients?
Okay, let me explain. You see, if I were to give an example, let me explain, Judge, through you, so that you get what is happening. When a patient is admitted, let's take a patient is admitted at, it's an acute patient. It's an acute patient. We admit that patient in a hospital for a number of days. After that, the patient, we make, the doctors there, I don't. The doctors there make a decision. Is this patient ready to go home or not? If the patient is not ready to go home, then we send the patient to a psychiatric hospital. Those are still acute patients. The problem there becomes then, like you correctly read, that the numbers of psychiatric patients, not mental health, you see there's a distinction there. There's a subtle distinction. For instance, let me give an example. A mental retardation patient is not necessarily a psychiatric patient. A patient with bipolar, yes, you know that.
But we're talking about mental health care.
Yes.
We're talking about mental health care services in this document.
But you must appreciate the service is not cut into pieces. The service is like a tube. So once a patient is in our hospital and the doctors determine, no, this patient cannot go home, the patient is socially dysfunctional, you take that patient to one of the three, either Tara or Vescopis or Sterkfontein.
Or Life Esidimeni.
No, not necessarily, no. You can still have a patient moving directly from a district hospital directly to Life Esidimeni. You don't, Baneng, for instance, you know Baneng? There are 3 centers around Life Esidimeni. Baneng is still in existence now, still under Life Esidimeni.
Yes, now I'm aware of the name.
You are aware of that, still subsidized by government.
Thanks to Mr. Mosinoki, I believe, yes.
No, we wouldn't, you can't touch Baneng. It's, okay, maybe thanks to Mr. Mosinoki, let's leave it at that. But I'm saying, Judge, I was explaining, then in that process, the doctors are the ones who make a determination. They say this patient socially is not functional. Then they go to one of the three. At that level, in those 3 institutions, the doctors there can still make a determination whether you go home or you keep on coming and going, or they make a determination this patient will never be able to go home. Now, that's where we now get stuck. The reason being, now there are more patients and more patients coming with the same condition, and the doctors are saying these patients can never be functional on their own. That's where now life as a demand comes in. So you must understand that, and this is why this document here clearly says, if we don't plan properly into the future, we are going to clog, already the system is clogged. We are already
That's
creating
precisely
more
the
pressure.
point. Thank you, Dr. Selebano. It's precisely the point, because that's what the letter of 28 April 2015 also pointed out to you, was this chain and of movement of patients, acute patients, into life esidimeni. And the psychiatrists themselves said, we have a problem because we don't have anywhere to put the long-term care patients. And by terminating the contract, there's no place for these patients to go. The NGOs are not adequate. That is what they said in that letter. We dealt with it yesterday, right?
And I said I don't argue with the letter also, remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So my question is, why then, in the face of all of that, are you terminating the contract that is clearly needed, and at the same time planning to spend many hundreds of millions on building extra beds that are institutional based?
You are saying at the same time, and I'm saying it is not at the same time.
Within months of each other.
No. I'm saying you are saying, and at the same time you want to build. No, it was not going to be built at the same time.
Okay, it
does
doesn't
not.
matter when
It
it was.
does.
The point is, you were thinking about spending money and you were cutting money. And I'm trying to understand what took priority here. Why did the rights of the mental health care users at esidimeni not take priority when it came to how you were looking at the money?
Yeah. Council, I wouldn't agree that the rights of the vulnerable, the most vulnerable people, were not taken into account. It's on hindsight, when this tragedy has occurred, that we can question the thinking. Did it make sense? Was it implemented correctly?
Did it make sense?
At that time, during our thinking, during that time. But now I'm saying, in hindsight, we can start questioning the whole
Well, answer me,
discussion.
did it make sense?
At that time.
Yes.
Yes, it did, at that time.
What sense did it make?
The sense was that patients will be relocated to NGOs as part of the institutionalization over a period of time.
Why did you ignore people more equipped than you, heads of psychiatry, who tell you this may lead to fatalities? Why did you ignore them?
Judge, if I read that letter properly, I'm not too sure, counsel would tell me. They didn't actually more talk about mortality. They spoke, if I read it casually, they spoke more about if you do this without sorting out the public health, the public health mental system. They said if you don't do that, then you are bound to have re-hospitalization. So there will be too much rebound. That's one of the things that I picked up in what they were saying.
You know,
They said, sorry,
you
Justice.
go ahead, Councillor. You go
What they said is you cannot do this unless you improve and invest in community-based care. There isn't community-based care. Therefore, this idea of deinstitutionalizing long-term care patients into the communities will, and in their words, these were their words, will have a devastating impact on their health and social well-being. Those were the precise words.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with
So
that. But I also
that
picked
comes
up,
quite close to mortality, doesn't it?
but they didn't say that.
But they
Did
didn't say death.
Do they have to say people are going to die? It's about
I
their
don't-
care, even when they are alive. Isn't it so, Doctor?
It's so. It's so.
Yes. And your duty is to provide them with the care that the law, our Constitution requires, the Act requires, government policy requires, as you were told this morning. Why do you compromise these norms of our society and place people in NGOs which are, hindsight, you know now, which were not fit for their
For
care.
the purpose, yes. I agree with you on that one.
Well,
On
yeah.
hindsight, really, it shouldn't have happened.
Yes, I know we're obsessive about hindsight, but you were warned before, that's the point. You were alerted before. Not once, council will tell you how many times. And you still steamed ahead. Hindsight, I hear. I'm worried, why did you steam ahead? And something that you have to grapple with because you were the person who was the head of the department. You were the DG of the department. Why did you steam ahead with something that would have adverse consequences, and we know, in fact, did?
Yes,
Why,
it did.
why did you proceed?
Yeah, but Justice also agree with me that I wouldn't have known that there would be mortalities. I wouldn't have guessed that. If I had known, really, then that would have been unthinkable that I would have gone on. I wouldn't have known. I didn't know, Justice. I didn't know that there will be mortalities.
Did you fear that there may be fatalities?
Did I fear?
That there may be. You didn't know that people would die.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't know.
You had
I
no
wouldn't know.
hint that perhaps did you fear that maybe their health would be affected negatively?
I'm not a clinician. When managers who are experienced...
Are you a medical doctor, Dr. Selebano?
I'm an MBCHB, yes. I'm not a clinician. There's a difference.
I'll come back to that. But my question is, did you have a concern about the negative impact on the health of the patients?
I wouldn't have had that.
You would not have had that.
I don't know how would I have had that, unless you guide me why I should have had that.
Well,
I wouldn't.
pointed you to one. I'll show you more, but I pointed you to the letter of 28 April 2015, and I'll come back to why else.
But you remember, Council, that I said I don't recall.
You don't remember whether you read it or not. I do recall that. Just before we leave LA 59 and the cost issue, the last page of that document has a paragraph headed Costing and Financial Implications.
Okay.
And it says the department is budgeting 20 million this financial year as the preliminary cost for planning and carrying out all mandatory investigation on identified properties. So 20 million rand just on planning. Then the GDID, is that the Gauteng Department of Infrastructure and Development?
Yeah, your normal, what people call public works.
Yes, is expected and requested to provide Gauteng Department of Health with all development costs required for the remainder of 2016-17 and for 2017-2018.
Yes.
What was that ultimate budget?
What
was the budget for all of those deliverables that I read out to you?
I don't understand what you mean by...
What would it have cost to implement this project?
But it says here, you read it, you say, it says GDID is expected and requested to provide GDOH with all development costs required for the remainder of 15, 16, 17, and 17, 18. It clearly shows.
Shows what?
We as health, we wouldn't have known the total cost for developing this. They are the implementing agency.
So you didn't know what this would cost?
They are the implementing agency. Our core business is health services. Their core
so you did not know what it would cost? Is that what you're saying?
known.
But
yeah,
you did know that it would cost 20 million just to do the preliminary planning?
No. It says the department is budgeting.
Yes.
When you budget, you are saying, I want to suppose that this thing will cost us this much.
Yes.
Then you say,
so you were expecting that would cost you 20 million rand?
For what?
For planning, for preliminary costs for planning.
Exactly, for planning.
Yes.
I don't understand.
Sorry.
Maybe 20 million sounds huge, but here, the infrastructure people are saying, when I don't know the cost of building, I don't know how it works. The planning, the architecture, the what, I don't know all those things. But if my experts inside the department say to me, let's put this portion for all the planning and all that, who am I to say, no, 20 million is a lot? I can't.
But what you did know was that it was too much at Life Esidimeni, that you were not getting value for money at Life Esidimeni. Yeah, is that right?
Council, you are being unfair. You are comparing things that you should.
I'm trying to understand how you think about value for money. So we're talking about terminating the contract with Life Esidimeni because you need to stretch the rand. Correct?
Yeah, through you, Justice, I think council is being unfair to me, and I'll explain why. The issue here, we're talking about planning.
You say the question is unfair?
Generally, it's unfair there, yeah. Because here we're talking about planning, and we're talking about budgeting into the future. Now, the council wants me to say, we can't plan into the future.
No.
Because here you are again, you are cutting costs.
Listen to the question and answer it, please. Just listen to the question.
No, you're not understanding me.
Yeah, maybe put it differently, Councillor.
You have determined that a preliminary cost for this plan, however noble this plan is 20 million.
For planning?
Yes, for planning. Yes. Nothing more than planning, 20 million rand in that year.
And the answer is yes there, isn't it?
The answer is it's a preliminary cost for planning yes. and carrying out all mandatory investigations on identified properties.
Sure.
If we
that is the answer. Council will ask
yes.
the next question. Yeah. Deal with the question, please. Yes, Council.
And at that same time, you had terminated the contract with Life Esidimeni because you needed to stretch the rand. Isn't that so? That's right. What you said.
Okay.
Yes. And how does it square then? Why is it that you couldn't, and why was all that urgency and emergency created from the termination of the contract with Life Esidimeni when at the same time there was money in the budget to pay for preliminary plans?
What?
Okay, deal with the question.
Well, I don't know. She says there was money in the budget. Here we are saying we're budgeting for. And I tried to explain the budgeted cycle. We're budgeting for this.
You said 20 million in this financial year.
We're budgeting for 15, 16, 17, and 17, 18. It's a budget cycle.
So could you not have then, in your calculations of this budget that would be available to you, consider using that money for the users at Life Esidimeni?
Well, I wouldn't, whether should I have considered that then and now, it's difficult for me to say.
In hindsight?
But why is it difficult?
No.
Your core mission is health.
But
you are there to provide access to health care. That our constitution requires, the law requires, that just plain morality requires. That's your core. Why didn't you remember how you can best give care to mental health care users at Life Esidimeni?
Yes, I hear you, Justice, and I agree with you. But you also have to agree that unless we move from the same understanding that there was no nefarious intentions. There was no nefarious intentions at all.
No, we're not talking about nefarious intentions.
It's important.
We're talking about caring, taking steps to provide health care. That's what we're talking about. Let's leave intentions out of this. It's a legal thing. It might arise one time or the other in the future. I'm just saying, why is it you can't... Well, I want you to, let's forget about it. Let's not impute anything to you. please tell us what is going through your mind. And that's what counsel is trying to do. When you talk about money and what you do with patients at life as it demanding, what were the considerations? That's what she's struggling to debate with you.
We're talking about money, we're talking about hospitals, clinics. It's not one subsystem, it's a big system. 36 hospitals. We've got 36 hospitals. We have 340 or so clinics, 67,000 or so employees, programs, vaccination programs, all these programs. I'm giving you this picture, Justice, so that it is not that it is not, please, Justice, and I want to say it with respect to you and the council and the House here. It is not in a demeaning way that there is no way that any other HOD, including myself, would be saying, I'm just thinking of one thing. You're thinking of how do we make sure that we don't fail on our HIV/AIDS program? It's critical for us. We don't do that. How do we make sure that when patients go to clinics, to hospitals, they still get medication? How do we make sure that when patients are in hospitals, there's still food for them, there's medication for them, doctors are paid? All those things, they constitute the big system of health.
May we add, how do you think the best way to fund NGOs where I have placed patients? Isn't that
It's
vital subset of your big job, isn't it?
Is. I agree with you.
How do I get the proper medication to patients that I have taken out of
NGOs.
life as a demand, to
That's
NGOs,
right.
isn't
Yes.
it?
It is.
How do I get care and skill to look after those patients when they are at NGOs, isn't it?
It is. I agree.
Did that happen on your part? Did that happen?
You mean now as an HOD or
As head of the HEDO, as head of the department?
On hindsight, I know that, let me explain again. There's something that you
Hindsight,
mentioned.
you know what?
Let me explain something that you mentioned, Justice. That I then got to know that actually even our subsidy for NGOs is actually not correct. We take patients to NGOs, but the type of subsidy that we are giving is not right. I got to know those micro details after the effect.
What is not right about the subsidy?
It's little.
It's too little.
Too little.
And in fact, it wasn't even paid to these NGOs.
For a period of time.
Would you agree?
It was not, I know that. I know that.
So that's why the money and the context of these users, that's why this context of LF59 is important for the families to understand this issue of money. There was only 112 Rand per patient allocated as a subsidy.
Which is, like I'm saying, Council, I concede on that one. When I got to know about that, I said, but what are we doing here? How do we expect NGOs to really be able to sustain patients?
But why don't you make sure, doctor, why don't you make sure with your staff they don't expose people on medication or mental health care users 4 months without proper supply of just food? Forget about the rest, just food.
It's tragic. It's tragic. It's unacceptable.
And in that 4 months, people started dying.
It's tragic. It's unacceptable. Really, you can't explain.
But what's
that.
your explanation as head of department? Why didn't you foresee this?
Well, it's not easy, like I was saying. But let me explain something to you. When I asked, but why were you not paying people here? You get all kinds of explanations. There was some NGOs didn't have this and that. And I said, but no. It's our responsibility. It's our responsibility. If they don't have a tax clearance, we don't put patients there then. We don't do that.
But why did you allow them to get out of life as a demanding when these things had not been tied up, Doc.
Yes, I give it to you, and I agree. I concede to all those things. That these managers are experienced. Dr. Manamela and her team, according to what I know, and not only herself and other programs, they are experienced in doing some of these things. Now suddenly you
She says she
discover.
never moved people in large numbers like this ever,
The department had done that before, I think.
and people died.
Yeah, it's tragic, but there's no excuse.
And you do it again.
When was that? I don't understand. Council?
We
No,
dealt
no,
with
no.
that- we dealt with that yesterday.
No, you
You
said
remember?
about moving people,
Yes.
the life as demand patients.
No. Why shouldn't you know this, Doctor? It was canvassed with you yesterday by Advocate Nguchana. In a letter written by clinicians to you, in which you're...
Oh, yes, yes, the 2009.
Yes,
Yes.
they draw attention to 2009 mass movement of mental health care patients.
Yeah.
You remember that?
I remember the letter now.
The letter was directed to you. And they warn in the letter that these patients died. They give a number there, if I remember, about 11 or so of the patients died.
The letter actually was read by,
Yes, indeed.
by
Now
the
you
council.
remember.
I remember that.
Now-
That's why I got lost when you said council.
Now we
Nguchana.
go back
It
to
was-
mass movement of people, and I'm asking, why didn't you take the precautions? About the basics, about food, about clothing. You're going to hear later about the outbreak of typhoid at Takalani. You're going to hear about, all those will be put to you today by council. But why didn't you take steps? You're the chief honcho to say, if this happens, it will happen in a humane way. Why
That's
did
what
you do that?
That's why I said, if we move people from life esteeming, it's either the same or even much better. I said that. I said that.
No.
I did.
What did you do to make sure it's in a humane way? That's the question.
Justice, I also explained that it is not feasible for any HOD anywhere in the country to be able to run everyday operations with all the programs inside any department. It is not possible. You rely, and I said that to council, you rely on your managers who are experts, who you have to develop a relationship of trust. If you can't trust managers that you work with, who do you trust? Because you can't do these things on your own. You can't.
Who do you think is responsible administratively for this tragedy of 143 deaths? Please engage with the question. It's a very important question.
I would say I take responsibility. I've said it to Professor, that I take accountability. It happened under my watch. I said that, and I'm saying it again. There's no way that if you are a leader, something happens, and then you suddenly want to walk away from it. When it's good, you want to raise your hand and say, no, it's good, then I'm taking it. No, it doesn't work like that. At least for me, it doesn't work like that. I was not there. I was not doing the everyday activities. I can't do that. It is impossible. But it happened under my watch. I was the...
And you
I've said
accept that the death occurred, the death of 143 of these patients occurred unlawfully, in circumstances which the law does not permit. Just to break it down. Circumstances in contravention of the law. The Constitution, the mental health care.
I would say the patients were compromised.
No, but it was unlawful. In circumstances which the law did not permit.
I would say the patients were compromised.
No, but what is your answer to my question? I'm asking about the law.
I don't know, Justice, I would want to say that I agree the patients passed away, and the report
The
was
government has
released.
already conceded that these patients died under unlawful circumstances. Do you differ with them?
But government has agreed. I've not engaged with government. As you know, I'm on suspension, so it's very difficult to me to say what are the reasons why they agreed. I don't know.
Do you agree that these patients died on account of negligence on the part of the department?
On the part of the department, yes.
Which you headed?
Yes. I've taken accountability.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you agree that they've died because of negligent conduct on the part of the department?
Yes, let me say yes.
Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. Dr. Selebano, I'm sorry, just to wrap up for now, the issue of the cost. You agreed that it cost the department 320 rand per patient per day while the patients were at Life Esidimeni.
That's right.
And you agreed that that was, in fact, value for money.
I'd never engaged with it before then. I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know whether it was value for money?
I wouldn't know. Like I'm saying, I never engaged with Life Esidimeni at that micro level to know what are the cost inputs in that 320. So I don't know.
Are you aware of the report by the Health Advanced Institute?
Yes, I saw that report.
And that was commissioned by the department
Yes, I remember that.
to look at value for money of Life Esidimeni.
That's
correct?
Yeah.
And they found that, in fact, it was value for money.
Yeah, but also they raised that some of the...
Did they agree that it was value for money?
The report.
Yes,
No,
the Health Advanced
yeah,
Institute.
but you're picking up... I don't have the report now. We could engage
I
on
can
the
put it
report.
to you if you would like me to.
I would like to have a look at it, actually.
Let me just get the reference for you. It's at volume 4, page 1387.
Page 1.
1387. This is the presentation that's based on the report.
Okay.
The presentation by an official at the Health Advanced Institute. Can I have it?
That's right.
And if you go specifically to 1394,
You said 1 3.
94.
Can I quickly browse through it, if it's okay with you, Councillor?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I'd like to browse through it.
It's quite in order. Take your time and read
Okay.
through it.
Have you seen this presentation by the
Yes.
Health Advanced Institute before, Dr. Selebano?
Well, it was done 14-15.
Yes.
I did have, it was commissioned by one of my managers, and then I got sight of it.
Can I take you to the relevant aspect?
But if you don't mind, it would really help so that I understand the context. Through you, Justice, can I just, I'll finish, I'm just browsing through it.
Yes. Take your time and look at it.
Yeah, I'll browse quickly.
Yes. Of course, council may take you to the recommendation
Yes.
that she is interested in, and you can work backwards from there.
Okay. I'll try and finish.
It's an extensive presentation, but council is interested in
One point.
certain conclusions that are relevant to our purposes.
I hear you, Justice, because we also engaged with this report, I recall very well.
Yes.
And we are the ones who actually sent it also to the professor. And there were other good things that we picked up from this report, but there were also other guidances that we picked up from this report. That's why I'm trying to look at it so that I can also
Sure, please do
check
that,
my memory.
and then you can take questions
Yeah.
on it from
Yeah.
Advocate Hassan.
Council, I've quickly ran through it, not in detail, but I
Sure.
think, yeah, we can.
Thank you, Dr. Selebano. The aspect I wish to refer you to is at page 1394, and it's the slide that is headed clinical compliance. Do you see that?
Okay.
And it's the last bullet point. And I'll just read it for the record. It says, in general, the services provided by Life Esidimeni is good value for money. HAI believes that sufficient and relevant information has been obtained to enable the Gauteng Department of Health to make sound and evidence-based decisions with regards to the future financial planning and management of the service level agreement. Did you agree with that?
Yes, I saw the statement and I read it, yes.
Yes, and you agree that it was good value for money?
It says in general.
Yes.
Yes, because
In general.
It also says relative, there's a
Yes, in
compliance.
general, good
Yes,
value
in
for money.
general.
Yes. And you confirmed this to the health ombud?
Yeah,
Isn't
we
that so?
submitted this. We gave it to...
But you also confirmed that to him in your interview with him, isn't that so?
Confirmed what?
In your interview with the health ombud. Let's go there, to the interview. Maybe it will be easier. It's Ella 111. It was provided to you yesterday.
Perhaps you can read it. I'll probably recall it.
Do you remember the transcript from yesterday of the interview between yourself and the professor?
I have it with me here.
If you have it, then let's go straight to the page. Relevant pages, page 29. Are you there?
All right.
At line 10. It says, and this is you, Dr. Tieko Selebano. You say, in your words, the truth is Life Esidimeni has perfected the business side of managing these patients. Professor Makgoba says yes. You say there is a report that you got, I know, from the health guy and Professor Makgoba intervenes and says advanced health. He means the Health Advanced Institute, isn't that so?
That's right.
And then it goes on, you say, yes, I spoke to them. That report will show you how they have managed to manage costs. Professor Makgoba says, no, they are one of the best in the business. Your response, in the world. There is no one to compare with them.
So, yes, that's what I said.
That's what you said.
Yeah. But also remember...
And them means Life Esidimeni.
That's right, yes.
So they were value for money.
No, but also, if you read, why don't you go through? So, number 25, they have not done extremely well. That is the business side. They have done well on the business side, but they know themselves that they were weak also on the clinical side. It's here also. And their mortality is showing. Now, there is it again. Their mortality also was showing. But then I said, well, it could be explained, I suppose. And then I went on to say, they did not have things like your pharmacists regularly there. You saw the report, I said that to the prof. And I said, well, let's go on. They do not have a lot of things, notwithstanding, I could understand why. And if you read the whole context, you'll understand. If you read one sentence, it's another thing.
So it was in fact not value for money in your view?
You see, I'm not saying that, but I was pointing out that yes, they were providing a service.
I'm not suggesting that Life Esidimeni was perfect. Let me make that clear. I'm not suggesting
that
at all.
I got an impression you are doing that, and I was saying no.
Right. Well, then let's dispel that impression. That is not what I'm suggesting. We've been talking about cost cutting. We've been talking. You, under fiscal pressure, made decisions, and you were paying for patients at 320 Rand per patient per day. The decision was to stop doing that and to rather pay 112 Rand per patient per day. Correct?
To the NGOs, yes.
Yes, to the NGOs.
But also add, with the added support that they were not doing, they didn't have pharmacists who were also going in that. And I'm not saying 112 is enough. That's not what I'm saying. I just want council also to complete, to say, and I said it yesterday, Justice, I said, in our thinking, we're saying, as soon as we have, and that is again, like I'm saying, Council with Justice with respect, you must look at the whole context.
I'm fully aware of the whole context. What I'm saying to you, Dr. Selebano, because I think we need to stay on track or else we're going to be here for many days.
No, but
so please, can you allow me to put the questions to you and to answer the question.
I'm sorry, Council, if
I'm dispelling, for the sake of clarity about my questions, I'm dispelling your impression that it is my view, and my view is of no consequence here, that Life Esidimeni was perfect. That's not the point. Okay? The point is the money, the cost cutting and why it was done and so on. That is why I'm putting to you the question. You've agreed 320 per patient per day was being paid, 112 Rand per patient per day was going to be paid to the NGOs, and in fact they didn't get that for some period of time. Do you know what the patients received at Life Esidimeni for 320 Rand per patient per day?
I mean, you'd expect that they should be fed, there should be activities that they're doing, and we would expect occasionally that they should be seen by a psychiatrist, by an OT, by a psychologist, all those things. They were part and parcel of what?
Accommodation.
Accommodation.
Clothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Medication.
The medication was at the expense of the department. We were giving medication. It's there also.
Transport to hospitals for follow-up visits?
Yes.
That's what, I'm putting that to you because that's what Dr. Mkachwa
Yeah,
has told these
but,
proceedings.
But he didn't tell you that there was also cross-subsidization. Baneng, they didn't need any transport because they are unable to do that. So the cost of Baneng...
Did they provide transport to the patients for follow-up visits to hospitals?
I suppose they did.
And they supplied daily toiletries, according to Dr. Mkachwa.
They should, yes.
They supplied clothing. They supplied meals. Dr. Mkachwa says they supplied 3 major meals per day and 4 snacks. They provided accommodation.
They provided security also.
Correct, for 320 Rand per patient per day.
But you see, I don't know, because I agree. You are now...
You agree with what? I always
that
want to
they,
know.
you know, they were providing all those things.
Okay. So then the next thing is this. You were then talking about building and there's 900 beds and so on. And yesterday you spoke about the option of buying Life Esidimeni. Do you recall that?
Yes, I tried with the idea of buying.
And you spoke to Dr. Mkachwa about the possibility?
No. During the discussions, I know Dr. Mkachwa, we know each other, and I said, Doctor, is it possible that we were just two of us in an office. Is it possible, would you be selling these facilities? Because I know that we have had ups and downs with yourselves in terms of payments. We're not paying them well. And he said, yeah, I can go and ask. Then he went to ask, and then he came back to me and said, yeah, this would be, we would consider selling. Yes.
So Dr. Mkachwa said the following, and I'm just reading from his transcript. He says, the proposal that I then presented to Dr. Selebano was, why don't you just take over our facilities, buy us out so there is continuity of care. And he asked me to go back and put together a proposal. I did go put together and evaluated the facilities, and I sent him the information which had 3 options. 3 options, that would be cash payment, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan. We never heard from the department.
Dr. Mkachwa pretends as if now he's the one who actually said, can we do that? I asked Dr. Mkachwa in my office with him, like I say, I know him, and I said, would we consider some of these options? And I said, in the discussion with the prof, it stalled. Why? Because then I said yesterday to...
So did you ask him to make a proposal?
I asked him to give me what would be the cost of the 3 centers.
And did he do that?
He came back. He orally told me, as far as I recall, he orally came back.
And then you say it stalled.
It stalled in me. I said it yesterday that it stalled because I didn't take it any further.
Why not?
Myself. I don't know. I mean, I just didn't take it any further. It stalled. And I told Council Estate, and I said it to yourself, Justice, that it's...
You know what remained in my mind in your answer was that, in fact, you had enough money to buy Life Esidimeni cash.
I did say that I asked budget, as he was going to check, I did say that I asked budget, if we were to scrape around, would you be able to get something? They came back to me and gave me a figure. Yes, I said that.
You said
they said
and
yes.
In fact, lo and behold, you were surprised. In fact, I have the money to buy...
You can get the money, yeah.
Cash. As they say in the township, to buy this thing cash, right? So you could have bought it cash. Why didn't you? ultimately that's where council will go.
You know,
Why did you prefer to displace the patients rather than buy the place and preserve it?
I hear you. You know, I mean, why I didn't think of pulling that thing through, it just stalled in my...
But Doc, you paid to be the decision maker. That's what leaders are. They make decisions.
Yeah, but I hear you.
But why didn't you make, or did you make the decisions? Why didn't you make it? You should know that it's something big. It's something ahead of deciding to displace nearly 1,500 patients.
Justice, I hear you, and I, with respect, I hear you. But also, let's not, as it's stalling in my head, it's not like I deliberately never thought about it. It stalled. There were other. I mean, I didn't fathom even for 1 minute that there will be such a tragedy. That's, you know, I mean, if you think about it now, if you ask me, how do you feel about that now? I just wish God I could have just bought these things at that time.
Yes, I'm with you. So, why didn't you do it? I mean, so it's an obvious, rational question, given the consequences that followed.
Yeah.
Nobody has insight into what the future might be.
Holds, yes.
Fair enough. But once we sit there now, we must ask, he is appointed and paid to make decisions. That's what a DG or HOD is about. And it was a relevant decision. It was one that would have spared us the tragedy.
Correct.
And it's fair to ask you, why didn't you make the decision?
Like you correctly said, I wish I had, and you said, if I had the ability to see into the future, to say, hey, there will be a tragedy, then at least I'm sure I would have made that decision.
But you know what the law requires of you? To take precautions, not to cause future harm. You know that.
Exactly.
You don't always have to know everything about the future, but the law expects every one of us, particularly those who wield public power, to take steps to avoid harm.
Fair.
Particularly to citizens. You know that.
I agree.
Yeah. Councillor.
Thanks, Justice. I mean, Dr. Selebano, you say if you could have seen into the future, you would have done so. You would have, it wouldn't have stalled. You would have acted on the idea of purchasing life Esidimeni.
Not only that, probably if I could see into the future, I would have even stopped.
Not even terminated the contract.
Stopped the whole thing.
Stop. Okay. So you don't recall too much about the April 2015 warnings, but in June 2015, you were informed of the risks again, and
can I have sight?
Yes, I'm going to refer you there. It's Ella 2, the annexures to the Ombuds report, Ella 2, and it's at page 47.
I generally get.
Let me get one of my staff members to help you there to the correct page. Oba King.
Is that the one, Oba King? Which page, Council?
47.
47.
It's on the letterhead of the South African Society of Psychiatrists.
That's right.
Have you found it?
I found it.
Does this letter look familiar to you?
I think I know about this letter. I know about this letter that went to the MEC. I know about it.
Have you read it before?
I should have read it. It went to the MEC.
And it was also sent to you?
Yeah, I should have read it. It was sent to also Dr. Mazamisa.
Yes.
Ms. Lesile Rutla, Manamela.
Yes, and to you.
and myself.
And it's dated June 2015.
That's right.
So it was before the termination of the contract. And if I could just take you through this letter. The first paragraph, the first big paragraph, starting the public sector. Do you see that?
The public sector, yes.
Yes. What the psychiatrists say here is the public sector psychiatrists of southern Gauteng have several concerns about the reduction of beds, restrictions on admissions, and planned closure of the Life Esidimeni care centres. And they therefore request an opportunity to comment on the matter, and so on. The next paragraph says the following. They start to set out their concerns. Starting off with the first one. They say, primarily, we are concerned that the reduction of beds at Life Esidimeni will have unintended, costly, negative consequences. As stated on page 16 of the NMHPF, which means the National Mental Health Policy Framework and Strategic Plan. And they quote
in the public sector.
No, so the paragraph below that.
Okay.
Primarily.
Okay.
Primarily, we are worried that the reduction of beds at Life Esidimeni will have unintended, costly, negative consequences.
Right.
As stated on page 16 of the National Mental Health Policy Framework, and they quote from the policy, deinstitutionalization has progressed at a rapid rate in South Africa without the necessary development of community-based services. This has led to a high number of homeless, mentally ill people living with mental illness in prisons and revolving door patterns of care.
Right.
Do you see that? We believe, it continues, that these problems will be exacerbated by the reducing chronic care hospital beds at community mental health services, as community mental health services are still insufficiently developed to cope. And it goes on. That's the crux of that. If you turn over the page, they're numbered paragraphs.
That is 48, right?
There are number of paragraphs. And it's just ahead of the numbered paragraphs, it says, they say rather, we would like to highlight the following points. And they start with number 1. The mental health care users who require placement in chronic care with 24-hour psychiatric nursing and on-site occupational therapy do so because of the severity of their psychiatric disorder, lack of insight, poor level of functioning, inability to live independently, and behavior that cannot be managed in a community setting. Medium to long-term hospital care is particularly necessary for MHCUs with a history of violent behavior before reintegration into society. Their second concern, we'll just go through all of the concerns and then I'll ask you the question. The second concern, the community-based residential facilities currently available are not equivalent to the Life Esidimeni care centers in staffing or equipment. They are non-profit organizations run by lay people who have an interest in caring for the mentally ill, right? I'm summarizing their concerns. The next paragraph, before number 3, it says the total number of government-subsidized residential beds in southern Gauteng for MHCUs under the age of 60 years is 809, and 95% are occupied. This is about 550 beds short of the norms adopted by the National Mental Health Policy Framework. Many of these facilities are open to the community. None employ occupational therapists, and if they do employ a nurse, it is only on a part-time basis. Okay, that was number 2. Number 3, most of the daycare facilities in southern Gauteng are for intellectually disabled children. There are 5 for mental health care users in the city of Johannesburg, and the West Rand has 1. There are none in Sedibeng or Ekurhuleni. People with severe mental illness living at home are very often left unattended and unoccupied during the day. This increases the risk of substance use and non-adherence to treatment. Number 4, with primary care re-engineering the district clinics, there are no longer any social workers or occupational therapists attached to the district specialist mental health clinics, which are also short-staffed of doctors. And it goes on, the intended district psychiatric specialist teams have not yet been rolled out. That was number 4. Number 5, according to the norms advocated by the National Mental Health Policy Framework, there is a shortage of more than 1,200 acute inpatient psychiatric beds in southern Gauteng. The existing acute psychiatric units in general hospitals are already overwhelmed by the revolving door of mental health care users. Those with comorbid medical illness and substance use disorders and mental health care users presenting with the first episode of psychiatric illness. They will be unable to meet the increased demand of hospitalization of mental health care users discharged early from Life Esidimeni. And then the next paragraph again quotes from the Mental Health National Policy, in which it says, these community mental health services will be developed before further downscaling of psychiatric hospitals can proceed, as the community mental health services are still severely underdeveloped and unable to support the current demand. We therefore believe that the reduction of beds and planned closure of Life Esidimeni is premature and acts in contradiction to the policy. So those were about 5 risks that were pointed out to you before the termination of the contract. So that was the second hint, if you want to use that word, but it was the second alarm.
That's right. I accept that. I accept that.
And what did you do in response to this letter?
You accept what? We need clarity because of the record.
The letter and the contents of the letter.
And that it... Sorry.
Please, you go ahead. I just want to hear the doctor's voice in response to your question. That's what I'm trying to get, yes.
Yes, Counsel.
Can you confirm that these were warnings that were received, that you received?
There were warnings given to the department, I confirm that.
And to you as the head of department?
Well, to me as CCD, yes.
Now, I'm not asking about the others for now because they're not present here. When they are present, I will ask them the same question.
Okay, yes.
But it was sent to you.
CCD, yes.
And these were warnings before you terminated the contract, so?
Yes.
Yes. And now I'd like to know what your response is. What did you do? Well, not response is was. What did you do?
Well, SASOP wanted a meeting with the MEC. And it's important because that's why I was said it was referred to the MEC.
Did it trouble you, these 5 detailed concerns?
At that
did
time,
it give you pause?
At that time, I wish we could have just discussed with SASOP so that we understand our concerns. But there were doctors who are SASOP members, Madieche, the one yesterday, and they were meeting regularly with ourselves. So I'm not defending, but I'm saying what was my feeling at that time, yes, I can't tell that.
But Doctor,
what was my feeling.
Could you engage the question, did these warnings worry you? That's what counsel just asked.
I don't know what was my feeling at that time. I don't know. I mean, it's 2015. Was I worried? Was I concerned? I don't know. This letter was sent to the MEC, and we're going to action it. She was going to action it. the MEC.
No, but you as head of department, risks are listed. The question is, did that engage your concern?
Justice, I hear what you're saying. I'm supposed to go back to 2015 and say what is my state of mind then. It's very difficult for me. But I accept that there were warnings. I accept that. There were warnings.
Okay, there's another way of putting it. It would be, why did you ignore the warnings? Because we know you proceeded. So why did you ignore these warnings?
Justice, would you honestly say that the warnings were ignored? The warnings came, and now even that letter that you read yesterday, Council, and this one, and probably some more warnings came our way. One wishes that you could wind back the time and act differently. That's what I can say. I wish I could wind back the time and act differently and do things the way the colleagues here were also saying, if I were to read, we urge the MEC for Health and the Gauteng DOH to reconsider the decision to cut long-term care.
Yes.
So, you know, when you read at it, and instead direct efforts to further development of the CMHS, I see it and I say, wouldn't it have influenced the fact that we now started thinking, you know, we need to plan better and further for this type of thing, the question that you're asking me. So I'm not defending it. I'm not saying in any way that we acted in the right manner. I'm not saying that at all. So I'm saying the warnings were clear.
The warnings were clear, and earlier in your testimony you said if we had a hint, then you could have done things differently. What I'm putting to you is that there were more than hints that were presented.
If I could foresee the future.
Yes, but that's what these doctors were doing. They were talking about consequences.
Well, you are going to, I've read it also. You are going to say, when I said they never specifically said there will be mortalities. They never said that.
So if they didn't say there would be mortalities, if they had said there would be death, would you have taken it seriously then?
You know, I don't want to be dishonest. I don't know whether I would have done it at that time or not. It would be dishonest of me if I said, oh yeah, if they said that, then I would have said this. I don't want to be dishonest. It's the same thing that I can't work out at 2015 what was my thinking at that. But the warnings were clear. I'm accepting that.
You accept that you received warnings? You accept,
warnings were clear.
Yes? And you accept that the warnings were clear?
Yeah.
And you accept that the warnings, there were warnings, which means it was a foretelling. They were saying, if you go down this road, there are going to be very bad things that are going to happen.
Yes, but they also specify those things, that there will be a lot of rehospitalization.
Correct.
Which rehospitalization is not mortality. So you release people, they can't socially sustain themselves, then they go back into the system.
They spoke about substance abuse.
Then they say, please, can I just finish? I'm quoting your letter here. They said it will be a revolving door. They say it, isn't it?
Yes,
Yes.
amongst other things, yes.
They say it will be a revolving door. I'm not saying that the warning was not adequate, but I'm saying also...
What did you understand by unintended consequences? Adverse unintended consequences. What do you think those were?
Unintended, you want to do this, the opposite happens. That's unintended.
You want to place people at an NGO and they die.
Or they get in the revolving...
Or they become, look, we're dealing with survivors of this project. And we've had evidence of how horrific their care was.
Yeah.
So forget about
We
death
will not,
for a moment.
yeah, I will not defend that again. I will not. I agree with you. I know.
So death is the ultimate, as we always
is
say,
sad.
ultimate price
Which is sad, yes.
that these patients paid. but another nearly 1,400 are survivors of this tragedy. So, death is neither here nor there, Doctor.
I was
The real
I hear
question
you.
is, why did you think these warnings are of no moment? Or at least, why did you proceed despite the warnings?
Justice, I heard two things. No, it's not that these warnings were of no moment. No, it's not that. Why we proceeded, like I've said, if I had that foresight to know that, if we are going to go this road, the consequences are going to be dire. If I had that foresight, I'm saying it again here, that I would have stopped.
But your colleagues tell you the consequences would be dire. They don't talk about death, but they say there'll be severe, unintended consequences on mental health care users.
I hear you.
Isn't that sufficient to get a caring administrator to review his decision? Why is that not sufficient?
I wouldn't say that was not reviewed that because we are not caring. The department still cares. I think
Well, tell
we
us.
agree.
That's what I'm asking you. I'm giving you an opportunity to tell us why, despite the warnings, you and the MEC went straight ahead. Why?
Well, I wish I know why we went ahead. I wish I could stop the wheels of history and say, stop, let's take another 10. I wish I could.
Was it executive arrogance?
You mean on my side?
Yes, I'm asking.
No.
You say you don't know.
No.
So I'm probing. You have to tell us, or we have to start.
No, I'm not an arrogant person. My people who report to me will tell me I respect my colleagues with a lot of humility. I never show off authority or power.
But why would you
I
dismiss heads of psychiatry in your department?
At a personal level, I didn't dismiss them. Prof. Zabo, one of the people who wrote the letter that you read yesterday, knows me very well. You can call him, he'll tell you that is not the type of person. I'm
Dr.
just saying, Prof. Justice, that I'm not an arrogant person.
I'm sorry for those who don't follow Tswana. I've just said, but you did not follow the advice that you were given by people who were possibly better equipped and informed than him. And he says he agrees. But I don't know why yet.
In fact, Dr. Selebano, in this letter by SASOP, they also say to you that there are mental health care users who have been classified as state patients currently waiting in prison for state patient beds.
That's right.
And they said the following to you: we consider this to be an infringement of the human rights of the mental health care user to appropriate psychiatric care, and believe the situation will worsen if chronic care beds for the mentally ill are reduced.
I think they were addressing a different issue here. It's a slightly different, it's inside the picture, but it's slightly different. You would recall, you know that when the courts refer people for psychiatric assessment, ordinarily they must go to a forensic psychiatrist, and we only have one at Vescopis and the other one at Sterkfontein. So the congestion is not really because of what you are alluding to. The congestion is slightly different.
The
also
congestion where?
In Sterkfontein and Vescopis is different because
So you can't remove the question.
No,
you're misunderstanding me, so let me clarify, because you can't remove the mental health care user in prison from mental health care users and the system in general. What they're saying to you is because of the insufficient number of beds, there are state patients who are waiting in prison, and that they consider this to be a violation of the rights of mental health care users. and that this project is going to worsen the situation.
Well, that's how they put it, but I was telling you.
But do you agree with what they say before you
That's
explain?
why I said to you, they are addressing a different issue here. The issue wherein somebody is assessed to, goes to court and they say, no, you are not mentally fit. Those should be in the Sterkfontein. And I said, we don't have forensic psychiatrists enough. I think we have one or two for the whole Gauteng province. And that is thus where the logjam is. And those patients are not sharing facilities with other psychiatric patients. They have their own separate facilities and they're full. There are a lot of social reasons why that is happening.
Yes.
Lots of social reasons.
Yes.
Yes. So that's why I'm saying they're addressing a separate issue. In fact, if we had met
I don't
with them,
see the separation of the issues, but can we just say this is what they are concerned about, that the human rights of those mental health care users are being infringed. And their concern is that the situation will worsen with the termination of the contract with Life Esidimeni.
okay, you are
Do you understand that? That's what they say. Can I read it to you again, or can I refer you to the right
You
sentence?
don't have to, but also you must accept that I am saying I hear that, except it's not, they are creating a correlation. It's not related.
So it
Because
wasn't
it's-
related to Life Esidimeni?
Yes, it's a part of the criminal justice system also. It's part of that, I think, yes.
No,
Yes,
they're
but-
saying if
The
you move
courts-
people out of Life Esidimeni, doctor, some of them may enter criminal settings that might increase those who await assessment and clog the system. Do you agree with that?
Just say it again, Justice, so that I understand
That's
exactly.
what counsel was putting it to you again. Let's go to the letter. He says the impact of closing Life Esidimeni is that some of the patients, acute patients,
They would be chronic, yes.
chronic ones rather, may, if they are violent and they are moved out of Life Esidimeni, may very well themselves fall into the criminal justice net, which is already clogged, where people wait long for assessment and whose rights, therefore, a variety of constitutional rights are violated. That's the link that the doctors, the psychiatrists are making. Why is that link incorrect?
I'm not saying the link is incorrect. I'm said it's inside the psychiatric realm. Except there is that they should have said, perhaps noting that there are no psychiatric forensic psychiatrists. Those are the important blockades that are happening. The country doesn't have psychiatric.
And if you release more patients of that class to the public or to NGOs, you may very well clog that waiting list even further. That's the point that they are making. Is it wrong?
I wouldn't, if they were sitting here, I would actually discuss with them and I would show them my point of view that,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you
So we just
discuss it
doesn't
with them at
agree
the
with the-
time? Sorry. Did you discuss it with them at the time?
No, there was never a meeting with them. There was
Never a meeting on this.
Yeah. Remember, they wrote to the MEC who...
Yes, and they
yeah.
wrote to you.
I'm
And you were the
CC'd.
head of department.
CC.
You were the head of department.
They wrote to the MEC requesting a meeting. I can't then call them and say, go and meet the MEC.
No, that's not what I'm saying. They wrote a
To the
letter.
MEC.
And to you.
And CC'd me, yes.
Yes. Is there some magic in CC?
No, there is a magic.
There is a bit. Okay.
I don't know why do you use the word magic.
Because you keep telling me that they CC'd you rather
Yeah,
than...
Cancel, but also you must be fair to me, and...
I'm not
I
being
don't
fair.
know.
I'm not being
You're not,
unfair to you. I'm trying to understand. You've already said you received the letter.
We can't have a heckling session, please. It's a discussion between your counsel and the witness, please. We have agreed when you are unhappy, you mumble, right? But no heckling, please. Council.
Thank you, Justice. You've already said you've received the letter. You've read the letter.
I know the letter.
Yes, and that there were warnings, that these were clear
I
warnings.
think we've passed that one.
Right. So let's not talk about CCing and all of that. The point is what we've just agreed to now. You, as the HOD, you bear a contractual relationship duties to your employer, correct?
That's right.
But you also bear statutory obligations as an HOD, isn't that so?
Fair, yeah.
Yes, in the National Health Act,
That's
correct? Section 25 of the National Health Act. So it was your duty, the buck stopped with you as the head of the department, to do something with these warnings. Is that not correct?
Not necessarily.
No.
Not necessarily.
Whose duty was it?
The letter was written to the MEC. I also get guidance from the MEC.
But you have statutory obligations.
And that is why nowhere do they mention. They just CC'd me.
Right. We're
You
back
may
to
not
the
like,
CC question.
You don't like it, I understand, but I'm telling you this.
It's not whether I like it or not. In fact, it's about the Constitution and it's about the law. You have obligations as a head of department under Section 25 of the National Health Act. You have statutory obligations. You have constitutional obligations under the Constitution. Many.
Council, I've said I take
And you confirm that you did nothing with these warnings.
Council, I've said I take accountability. I've said that. You don't have to repeat all those things. I take accountability. And I say, I wish that if I had foresight,
Yes, but
I would
that's
have
why
acted
these letters are...
differently.
Sorry, Dr. Selebano, the foresight was provided to you.
no, you know it's not true also.
Oh, no, I'm not lying. I've put it to you in the form of 2 very detailed letters. I'm not making it up.
I take your point, Council.
You didn't do anything with these warnings. It did not give you pause. Isn't that so?
I think I did say that
You did
we
say
wish we could have acted on the warnings. I've said that.
Justice, it's about time, almost time for the tea adjournment. And before I move on to another topic, maybe we should adjourn
Yes, we should. Ngaka Selebano, ilo go nwa tee yaanong,
Ke a leboga.
o boe fa ka 12 o'clock.
Thank you, Redi Kgang.
Gompieno yana.
I got another Redi Kgang, Justice, excuse me.
We are adjourned.